So I just made a video that I certainly didn't expect to do as well as it did. Well, for many channels, 2,000 views is nothing to awe at. In my experience, it truly is something rare for someone of my size. As a result, I thought it best to put in some extra work to shore up some of the weaknesses of my major analysis and review. Indeed, while it is quite janky, the lengthy disparity between the humans and the elves is so much so that I feel addressing this problem should be considered. And so, here we go. If you have watched any of my more free-form content, mainly my Twitch streams where I make an absolute fool of myself, the occasional question always comes through the woodwork. Porky, what is your favorite Warhammer faction? At the end of the day, this becomes a toss-up of Bretonnia, Vampire Counts, and all three flavors of elf. With that said, you can kind of see why the disparity between humans and elves when it comes to the detail I provided left me with at least a twinge of self-disappointment. Given the recent release of Sea Wardens of Cothique just a few days ago, I feel this makes it optimal to go over the finer aspects of elven life, more esoteric roleplay concepts, and the more elf-unique things you can do in Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. While I won't be going over the exact stats of elven origins, as we already did that in my previous review, time-stamped for ease of watching, I shall give you the quick and easy summary. All High Elves have a stat spread that's roughly 10 points or so above the average human, with a lean towards intelligence and initiative. As a result, Elves make fantastic academic characters, such as mages, wizards, and scholars, while also performing well in warrior-class areas of ending combat before it begins. Of course, this comes at the cost of less death saves. The inner kingdoms of Ulthuan usually tend to double down on this concept, or specialize in a particular area. Avalorn is more relaxed, Hoeth focuses on wizardry, or rather magery, more on that later, Illyrian on mounted combat, and so on. The outer kingdoms of Ulthuan, then, tend to focus more on defensive measures, or widespread exploration, making them the superior elven choice for sailors, charioteers, party tanks, and the like. With that preface out of the way, let's establish the content foundation for this video. For Chapter 1, we shall be explaining the concept of elves in Warhammer. We shall be going over a brief history of the Ulthuani alongside notable faction relations. In Chapter 2, we shall engage in discussion regarding elven unique concepts in Warhammer Fantasy roleplay specifically, such as their long age and some mundane unique careers. Chapter 3, we shall go into the place of magic and faith in Ulthuani society, alongside the careers that engage in those areas. Chapter 4 shall be the Intrigues of the High Elves, and finally, Chapter 5 shall be touching on the other book, Sea Wardens of Cothique, using all of the concepts we have explored to dive into the expansion proper. I am particularly excited for Chapter 5 as of writing the script, as the book came out essentially right when the first review came out, so it's a little new to me as well. Keep that in mind when we get there. Finally, unless contextually mentioned, usually when I say the phrase elves, I am referring specifically to the Azure, or High Elves. All of the playable careers and mechanics relate directly to High Elves, although there will be lore that relates to the High Elves that might mention other elven subtypes. With that said, let's get into it. If you think the High Elves of Warhammer are simply long-lived humans with pointy ears, you are sorely mistaken. Humans have many things the elves do not, a vexing stubbornness to overcome the hells itself despite overwhelming odds, and an adaptability that allows them to survive with nothing more than the clothes on their back. The elves, too, hold things that humans do not. In this, elves are sensitive, and I simply do not mean emotionally. An elf can see and hear things a human cannot. An elf can see the end before it arrives. An elf can experience more pleasure and more pain than a human could from that exact same experience, exponentially more. This is a natural sensitivity that bleeds into their every life. They know the threat of chaos, and even the darkest of Druchii know that if chaos wins, it's all over. And so for the most part, every elven civilization, from the pristine to the wild to the dark-hearted, will fight against chaos in the name of order. And still, all of them may, at one point, secretly desire the power and luxuries something like chaos might temporarily provide. It lures them from the shadows. It whispers to them a pleasure that only they could feel, a power only they could utilize, and a beauty only they can behold. The elf's sensitivity is not just a gift, it is their greatest boon. It allows them to see the winds of magic more readily, and allows them to mold their culture into one of pseudo-perfection and refinement. It is also a curse. It keeps them rooted in their own time, forever grasping at the mental image of never-made potential, languishing at what they are too caught in themselves to ever accomplish, and they forever claw at themselves in spite of those moments when the temptation becomes impossible to resist. It allows them to feel empathy on such an unabashed scale that they might release one scheduled for death, and then languish at the horror such a man brings after. The elves are the most beautiful house of cards. They are the squishiest and most destructive of glass cannons. The oldest of the elves cut themselves off from life. They self-isolate. They force themselves to grow numb to the world, for its every feeling is a maddening maelstrom of temptation and magic and power. And yet, despite knowing the truth of the world, despite foreseeing the end, their people are too separated, sparse, or vicious. Their allies are little more than young savages that die savagely, and instead of listening to advice, they just embed their errors and die before they can ever change them. And this is the conundrum of the elf, the paradox. They see the way the world is moving before anyone else. They can feel every burnt blade of grass, every slit throat, and every call of the void. They find themselves caught between their own lamentations and the fools that condemn the world to death. An elf's long life is one of competency at the expense of unlimited sensitivity. They numb themselves in culture, in the wilderness, or in power. A high elf's life, then, is almost noble bright in its tragedy. Their society might have been perfect once, but it is not now, and never again will it be. Ulthuan is marred by many tragedies, but in my opinion, 3 are the most relevant. The first, of course, is the original set of Demon Wars. Not only did this allow for Slaaneshi occultism to fester in Ulthuan, but it was devastating to Ulthuan's population. The Demon War ended when the High Elves, and if you believe Total War Warhammer 2, the Slann, created and reinforced the Vortex, respectively, to drain excess magic from the world. Demons, being things of pure magic, found themselves unable to maintain their forms and dissipated. Cultists and the like were called where applicable, but the seed was sown. In the many, many years after, Ulthuan became a veritable empire. They spread their seeds across the world, and many elven colonies formed in esoteric regions. In this time, humans were still in a Neolithic sort of state, and were just cavemen to be shooed away and ignored. During this time as well, the elves and the dwarves started meeting in earnest. The elves found the dwarves' sturdy goods and trade to be dependable and trustworthy, and the exotic powers and goods of the elves gave the dwarves some excellent opportunity to explore specializations they hadn't before. Indeed, this was essentially a golden age of diplomacy, population growth, and exploration for both peoples. Remember the seeds of chaos earlier? They'd finally come to roost. Nurturing resentment over losing the vote to his father's throne, one high elf felt the embers of doubt rise into a conflagration of fury. After discovering that his own mother, the once queen consort, had held the collar of Ulthuan's foremost pleasure cult, he had decided to take matters into his own hands. And so this high elf orchestrated the death of the Phoenix King, and in doing so, was rejected by the flames of Azarian upon attempting to become the next one. He was brought back to Nagaroth. Encased in sorceress armor, he rose, rechristened as Malekith, the Witch King. Armies rose in his name, and darkness descended over Ulthuan. The civil war and resulting magical battle was so destructive it sundered half of Ulthuan, forcing Malekith's rebels to flee from the Ulthuani loyalists. And so this kin strife, this sundering, became Ulthuan's second greatest tragedy. In this, the rebels are seen as Druchii, dark elves, and they fell to the temptation of war and torment. The dark elves were not content to become little more than a piratical slaving empire. Malekith saw himself as the true Phoenix King, and he would have his kingdom or see it burn in flames. Many of his schemes caused untold strife around Ulthuan, but perhaps the worst, and this is debatable, is where he systematically broke down the friendship between the elven people and the dwarves. Nurturing both of their pride, and through murderous intrigue, the dwarves declared war on the elves, and thus the elves lost all of their colonies in the old world. A few decided to not return to Ulthuan, retreated deeper into the forests, and became known as the Wood Elves. Thus, their third greatest tragedy. And now the High Elves are a people thrice divided, and a fate thrice sealed. Some believe the now dominant human kingdoms are the key to success, but they're fractious and divided. Some are piratical, some are chaotic, and others are misguided. And so the elves are confronted with this, a key to keep the world safe from chaos, a goal that they had fought so hard for, just out of their reach, mired by division, corruption, schism, and total war, in various different fashions for thousands of years, all the way up to the modern day, to 2512. With all of this under your belt, it's important to understand the viewpoint of a High Elf character. How do they relate to these themes of Ulthwani culture and society? Do you seek some sort of positive change, perhaps? Do you seek to break away wholesale from Ulthwani society? Keep in mind, a High Elf specifically is one who was raised in Ulthwan. If you're born abroad, you are a Sea Elf, and don't have as many considerations. Another aspect is the difference in etiquette you might engage with, keeping yourself alien, yet equally formal when coming across human society, tailored to you and your character's preference, might be a solid path forward. High Elf children are, and I quote, nurtured meticulously. As an Ulthwani-born High Elf, you're schooled until the age of 20 and are drafted into the Citizens Militia thereafter. Thus, you're starting bow and melee advanced skills. At the age of 50, you're classed as an adult, more or less, which is marked by a coming-of-age ceremony dependent on your house, class, and social status. A Cothique middle-class family might have a small procession by the Temple of Mathlum, while a Lotherni upper-class family might have a magical extravaganza for the affair. Another thing to consider is whether or not you are descended from the line of Anarion. Anarion, the first Phoenix king, was forced to draw the Sword of Cain, giving himself great power, but in exchange, he doomed his line to madness and illness. You may choose or roll to be descended from this bloodline, and if you do, you get half off for many useful combat talents or half off for spell memorization costs, at the expense of essentially a free, non-corruption threshold mental corruption, already giving your character a bit of insanity trade-off for power. If you're a High Elf traveling across the old world, then the rather humble goods should give you at least some cause to look elsewhere. Azure goods are notoriously amazing. Not only is every High Elf weapon or item more expensive and superior to their human counterparts, but I imagine they exist in a much more storied state as well. Before we move on from concepts to stats, I want to touch upon the effects of an inner moral state that most High Elves attempt to follow the path of. Indeed, this state, called Yenlui, is a concept of maintaining one's balance throughout their near-infinite lifetime. It is the cultural recognition of the High Elves' high level of sensitivity to the world, and it's up to you whether or not you ascend it into a lighter state, allow yourself to fall into a darker state, or maintain balance. In most cases, maintaining balance is the best option, but there are certain things, such as if you commit evil deeds or have the blood of Anarion or commit kind acts, that you will shift from one state or another between light, dark, and neutral, keeping in mind that being in a state will negatively or potentially positively affect certain aspects of High Elfdom. If you're too dark, you fall into depravity. But if you're too light, you will become transfixed by your own empathy and never solve the core of problems, only really healing the symptoms. Playing this up in roleplay based on your states might be something fun, or something to worry about dependent on your playstyle. High Elves are adept at weaving intrigues and using the subtle art of conversation to get what they want. You may attempt what I call social tests, charm, intimidate, entertain, or other, difficulty determined as always by context and GM, when speaking with other High Elves, to not only hide the true intent of your words to non-High Elves, but also to not accidentally make a misstep against your social opponent or manage to get some social intrigue done against them. More on that in Chapter 4. When engaging in any act, a quote-unquote true High Elf seeks, again, inner balance, subtle words, and if action does need to happen, it is swift, elegant, and decisive. Of course, you can always be a bit of a renegade and act according to your character, but be aware, especially if you are around other High Elves, this is a bull-in-the-china shop moment and might cut you off from Endeavor trainers, Ulthwani contacts, and other such things. Beyond the art of conversation, elves may also replace their ambitions. If you recall from my previous review, Ambitions are personal goals characters engage with for experience, resource recoupment, and potential retirement. Instead of long-term ambitions, elves may succumb to their sensitivity and turn it into an obsession. Instead of a specific act, an elf instead engages with the emotions of a specific act, while a human's long-term ambition might be to, say, acquire the career of gunnery captain. An elf's obsession might be to become the perfect shot, to the point where he can never ever miss. In the system, this is functionally impossible, but the GM can rule that, perhaps through either an absurd skill level or social recognition, this elf's obsession may be required. However, unlike LTAs, obsessions don't go away. So you do get your 500 XP, but you still want to become the perfect bowman. You still have a 5% chance to miss every shot. That's too low, isn't it? You need to become better, become perfect, and so you keep training. You keep convincing people you are exactly as you say, but the truth is the truth, and the obsession as such always remains. It's a very good way of depicting an elf's ability to feel in both negative and positive ways, in both abstract and material obsessions. Obsessions seem vague, but there is a bonus. You may re-roll psychology tests regarding your obsession once per session. With this in mind, let's say the group encounters a massive beast they're trying to hunt. Well, the beast surely wouldn't scare someone who can shoot it down in just one blow, and so the high elf of the party manages to re-roll and overcome his fear of this large beast. Your Yenlui state affects your obsession as well. In a light state, you may take only the beneficial aspects of your obsession, so instead of freaking out over every missed shot, you just keep that reroll. In a neutral state, you experience both positives and negatives, and if you're in a dark state, you may sometimes only be subject to the negative aspects of your obsession. With all that said, keep in mind that light Yenlui also gives you negatives in other areas, so you are trading obsession positives for other factors. While obsessions replace LTAs, dreams then are a high elf's potential replacement for short-term ambitions, or as I call them, STAs. Especially Heaven's wizards and followers of the gods Lilith and Morai Heg experience these dreams the most, although any elf can theoretically experience one. Dreams are vague, almost fortune-telling-like scenarios. Perhaps the group are about to encounter a murderer, and the elf's dream is a hawk killing another bird, and lo and behold, the serial killer in question is a fellow elf. This allows for temporary STA replacement on the player's front, giving them more opportunity to acquire XP. Fate, however, is fickle, and the vagary of dreams should be played up. Speaking of replacements, a quote-unquote true high elf must replace many of their career skills as well. Bow instead of black powder, for example. There are specific career replacements for more than a few careers, but keeping in mind Azur's sensibility, it's very clear that even the most dirty high elves act with elegance in their careers, and thus skills and talents are replaced accordingly. You can use the book, because it definitely offers a lot of replacements, or just ask the GM. Notably, elves do not require magical licenses as magic careers, so an elf is an excellent way to get around magic legality in the Empire. Keeping in mind, however, that elves who choose the generic wizard career would certainly be looked down upon by the much more impressive and high elf unique mage careers. For a more generic look and description of the symbology in these broad career templates, check out my review. Otherwise, let's get into some careers, and honestly, I love a lot of these. The Sea Guards are, much like the Elves, meant to be a career specializing in competency and damage. These are the more advanced military units that are drafted from the competent soldiers in the Citizens Militia. They have amazing all-rounder combat skills and can survive well in a sea-based campaign. The talent lines here are also pretty interesting. Talents like Warrior Born or Lightning Reflexes are obvious pickups as they increase your base characteristic line without adding to your advance's cost. Essentially, the more points in a thing you buy, the more expensive it becomes, and talents like Warrior Born and Lightning Reflexes serve to add points to your character without affecting your cumulative costs. Very useful. A lot of shoulder-to-shoulder fighting talents as well, which makes sense. And of course, a sneaky little hardy in there, an excellent way to make up for your character's potential low toughness bonus when it comes to health calculation. Finally, the more you continue down this career, the more specialized you become in the art of sailing more complex ship types, going up to a skycutter, which is like a magical flying high elf boat, very unique, but also not super useful in games that don't have these ships. Still, the combat utility this career group provides makes it a pretty easy side grade for early high elves who struggle with combat. The Swordmaster is my personal favorite. These guys are literal Dark Souls or like anime characters or something. Lithe, skinny guy with a huge sword. These elves are the bodyguards for the lore masters of Hoeth, and as such rely on a combination of swordplay and academic aestheticism. When they get to level 2, they are granted an enchanted greatsword, and with these they can perform some really interesting things. Not only can sword masters acquire unique martial arts, but they can also acquire unique sword dances for different effects in combat, also modified by Yenlui state. They're basically sword monks and are feared by enemies of the High Elves. They are indeed true heroes, at least in terms of skill, and to be honest, I wouldn't let a character start as one. Their skills are a combination of melee prowess in the early game and more leadership and scholarly things focused later on. They are known and respected by almost every High Elf in existence, and are never to be treated lightly. Especially for your old world GMs, treat with caution. But if you enjoy a more high fantasy type of game, give a High Elf the opportunity to become a Swordmaster. The Shadow Warrior are those elves from the outer kingdom of Nagaroth who have dedicated their lives to vengeance against the Dark Elves for their betrayal and subsequent ruination of Ulthuan. The Shadow Warriors are the closest you're ever going to get to morally good assassins in Warhammer. Their early game gives them combat prowess, tracking, hunting, and otherwise mastering the wilderness, while their late game gives them more thieving and exploration type skills and talents, a fun inversion for most rogue careers that combine stealth and combat. The Merchant Adventurer is your typical mountain blade to your character, someone who traverses the land for thrills, wealth, and the domination of those under you. Indeed, the Merchant Adventurer fulfills the rather unique combination of sailor, merchant, dungeoneer, and monster hunter. A very interesting combination for those who want a less standard profile for a single career group, focusing on rather non-standard picks for talent lines such as Detect Artifact, Seasoned Traveler, or Orientation. Strength gains are not until level 4 though, and since you get no willpower or toughness, you'll end up squishier than most. Using that money from all that merchanting and rare loot to buy gear to compensate, alongside the various influential things money can buy, serves as an adequate alternative. After all, one need not hunt sea monsters alone if they can buy a mercenary fleet. Are you that type of person who plays like The Sims for the character creator? Then the aestheticist is right up your alley. This is a non-combat career that focuses on the subtle, social, and beautiful arts. You learn the skills to see flaws in things, you hone your intuition, and you weave social experiences as a flaming phoenix seen by all, or as a subtle shadow that uses a whispered word. This is the premier social high elf, and your ability to sow harmony or strife can be pretty massive. Art, languages, performances, seductions, and intrigues. This is the character for those who wish to look perfect and make everyone think that you are perfect. Just like how the previous combative careers might lack for social graces, the aestheticist is the opposite. You are trading combat prowess beyond improvisational fighting techniques for pure social grace. You don't fight. You convince others to fight for you. Acquiring a few NPCs to guard you via your social abilities might be key if you're entering long stretches of no civilization and lots of combat. So, let's discuss age. The High Elves are a notoriously long-lived people. So long-lived are they that elves don't really tend to die. They simply fade, Obi-Wan style. Some elven nobles, when close to a toporic state, will have their various subordinates and yes-men hide them away in a chamber filled with supplies, and the various subordinates will continue to delude themselves that the elf will never die, and in some cases, they might never even open the chamber again. There are a rare few elves that can avoid this fate through the power of extreme willpower. The one I can personally think of would be Elithanar, who is currently one of the longest-lived elves, and his fury and rage against the Dark Elves keeps the power of age away, even as thousands of years has passed. Other elves have preternaturally extended their age through mastery of magic, although such unnatural life extension usually goes into the realms of necromancy or dark magic, prime examples being Malekith the Witch King and his mother, Merathi. To a lesser extent, Hellebrand might also be put into this category, but the holy rituals she uses in Cain's name are nowhere near as effective, bringing only temporary youth upon her. With that said, the oldest elf you'll be able to play as is one that is around the age of 1,000. When it comes to Elven age, the default age range is from 40 to 130 years old, which is your standard Tier 1 character age for an elf. However, you can also play as an Elder if you so wish. An Elder may have lived through one or multiple, essentially mythological/historical ages of the elves. Not including the current time, there are up to 5 times you can be a part of, with progressive negatives that coalesce with your age. So why would you play an old elf if you get all these negatives? Well, for every time you live through, you may roll a career and allocate 15 advances across the skills of that career. You can, optionally, choose a career for 10 advances. You cannot extend a skill beyond 5 points per time period, but you can essentially play Mega Gamba with your elf age and create some radically hilarious web of careers. Or a single career with 50 advances across the entire set of times, or a mix of these. The burdens are nothing to scoff at, surely. Changing in Louis, a prejudice against the most common species in the game, and worst of all, no death saves. So if you want to play as an 1,000-year-old crotchety bigoted elf who is out of luck and full of PTSD and has lived way more careers than you little human, you totally can. Is it OP? Yes. Is it cool? Also yes. I would treat a max age character with serious caution, similar to ogres. 1 time might be fine and acceptable, but 5? Just make sure you know the balance of your party, your style as a GM, the scale of the campaign, and the player's disposition before giving the green light. If someone were to choose a career, that's 25 points at character creation to a single skill, 5 points per time, and if the RNG is lucky, there can even be more crazy overlap with multiple skills. Keep that in mind. Lore-wise, the elven concepts of both faith and magic go hand in hand, something I briefly touched upon in my review. Indeed, the act of reaching the gods' favor is just another form of magic, and the elves, being absolute masters in the subject, do not deal in the work of miracles or blessings. Indeed, all they do is magic, and particularly, they deal in the art of high magic. High magic, or Heish, is the ultimate good guy magic, much like Dar is the ultimate bad guy magic. While using one of these doesn't necessarily make you a good or bad person, one is inherently harmonious and one is inherently corruptive, so... Much like standard light side, dark side tropes, Dar is much easier to learn compared to Heish. While Dar opens up avenues to magics a human wouldn't necessarily be able to learn, Heish allows an elf to put their proficiency in all 8 color winds to the test, learning spells of extreme power. Just like all magic, however, this does come with some serious risk to consider before attempting. Learning high magic is a tenuous process. Generally, lore-wise, it takes 10 years to finalize the process to begin to start learning high magic. This can be in the form of the Blessing of Isha talent, taken at character creation, emphasizing your character's ability to cast High-Ish. Further, elves have the ability to take on new channeling lores and memorize new spell types beyond their starting magic schools. When an elf receives 10 points of channeling in a magic school, they may purchase another arcane magic talent for 100 XP to learn an additional school. Through this method, an elf can expedite those 10 years by proving to the White Tower of Hoeth they got the stuff necessary to learn high magic. The stuff, of course, being at least 10 points in all color magic schools, as well as some demonstrable skill at magic. Once you pass either the first step as a starting high mage or the second step as a side grade high mage, you can then begin to start learning high magic as you would other magics and careers via the high magic talent. In this, you would normally learn petty and arcane spells first, and interestingly, a lot of these arcane spells tend to combine various lores of magic for increasingly interesting effects. High magic itself is very difficult to control though, even for masters of magic like the elves. As a result, while you can risk miscasts as normal, you may also suffer something called magical burnout. If you recall from the review I am sure everyone here watched, spells have a CN requirement that can be met with a channeling skill, while the language skill is actually used to cast the spell. With this in mind, all spells can have additional effects if you cast the spell with excess success levels, a process called overcasting. Increased damage, range, effect duration, and more can all be added to your spells when you overcast them. Just like all magic, you can overcast high magic as well, but this comes with a risk. Any time across your magical career you overcast High-Ish, you build up a pool of points known only to the GM, I imagine. Once you exceed your willpower bonus, you must make a magical burnout roll, determined by the amount of SL exceeding the bonus. So 1 SL over the bonus means a 1% chance of burnout, or 100 on a D100 roll. If you're unlucky enough to receive burnout, you may no longer cast spells for a number of days equal to the units digit of your roll, and if the roll itself is a double of any kind, magical burnout is permanent. You either spend a fate, aka a death save, a precious death save being an elf, or you can no longer cast magic. While this is an incredibly slim chance, especially for stronger casters, it's still a big risk when overcasting magic. This means, naturally, that the overcast effects of high magic spells are quite powerful. High magic is the combination of all magic, of fire, heavens, light, death, life, shadow, beast, and metal, so the spells are multifunctional things that each of these singular things wouldn't be able to do, or Haish's power is such that it's much easier in SL to achieve these singular effects. Apotheosis for heals or even reanimation, Arcane Unforging to eliminate heavily armored opponents almost instantly, Hand of Glory to boost your allies by a hilarious potential of 30 points to one of their stats, and more. High magic is the reason why people fear Teclis, Lore Master of Hoeth. High magic is why the elves, despite being technologically inferior to the humans and dwarves, remain relevant and revered and respected. High magic is the foundation of the elven way of life, their sorceress power, and the reason why they were able to save the world. And maybe, just with the obscene power and danger of high magic, so too might your character change fate itself. High Elves, unlike the other species, have long enough lives and extensive enough powers to unlock level 5 careers. The Mage is essentially the wizard boosted on steroids. The generic wizard career is a solid overall magic user for humans and gnomes, and humans can access a number of human-specific wizard careers based on the win they choose. Before this book, elves just had to be content with the generic wizard career. Now, however, the mage stands as the supreme overall magic user, accessible only to high elves. The first 2 levels of mage allow you to choose level ups in any color magic of your choice, so you may keep increasing either 1 or 2 magical lores from your previous 8 learned magics. Alongside these first 2 levels are classic wizard talents that help with roleplay and perception, like Second Sight and Detect Artifact. Beyond this, very similar to the wizard, you can also acquire petty magic as a talent as well, assuming you're starting as a mage and not specializing into one mid-game. Assuming you're in the former camp, ensure you also pick up the Arcane Magic talent from level 2 as well, so you can memorize spells from a lore of your choice beyond Haish. Level 3 Mage is where things get interesting. Blessed by Isha and High Magic combined allow you to finally cast Haish spells. Alongside this, Lily's Blessing allows you to boost your High Magic spells, and Dual Wielder gives you some combat potential in melee if the enemy gets too close. For High Mage, Fast Hands allows you to get SB stacks on touch-based spells, and Iron Will makes you immune to intimidation, and finally Archmage gives you the premier wizard talent, War Wizard. This at first may seem almost a downgrade, as level 4 human wizards get War Wizard. However, when you realize that most Haish spells, even the ones that are 5 CN or less, have the potential to outstrip color magic's more powerful spells with Haish overcasts, you can see why it's here. Casting something like Apotheosis as a free action can be really busted, especially if you use the reanimation overcast after felling a strong enemy in a fight. And now that big BBEG, his 2 minions are back alive, and they're fighting for the party instead. Solid stuff. The Wood Elves, Dark Elves, and High Elves all worship the same gods, as all of them come from the same people. Where the Wood Elves venerate Kurnus and Isha, the High Elves have a different order of priority with their gods. Azurian, the creator god, is top dog here. It makes sense, being the creator god, much of the High Elven culture, architecture, and hierarchical structure is made to pay homage to Azurian. Essentially, he's god with a capital G to the High Elves and is paid some homage as well by the Wood Elves. As a High Elf player, I recommend going with Azurian alongside the god that fits most your career. Hoeth for mages, Kane for assassins, Hakardi if you're going like a necromancer or a Dar user, and so on. Beyond this, perhaps a choice other few for roleplay purposes or some backstory. So you want to be an Elven Priest? Well, in lore, a High Elven Priest is generally referred to as an Archmagi, not to be confused with the Archmagi level 5 career at Mage. But theoretically, a level 5 Mage is a priest, just a priest of the god of magic, and are you confused? Well, if you are an elf, you need to keep up, because you need to be a level 2 mage to even be able to access the priest careers of the elves. In short, elven priests have some serious commitment they must adhere to, and are already proficient in at least a wind of magic of some type. They are, functionally, mystical thaumaturges, the only instance of cleric-wizard combos if you were to use D&D or Pathfinder as a comparison point. Since elves don't have access to miracles nor blessings, they also do not accumulate sin. Instead, much of their unique and godly magics have sacrifices that must be adhered to, similar to ingredients for hedgecraft spells. Further, if an elf follows the tenets of their god, the GM may proffer some sort of roll bonus as applicable. The book says stuff about Yenlui states, but honestly, I'd keep it a little loose. Give them some applicable rewards to make them want to follow the god in question. The Smith Priest of Vol, which can interestingly be chosen by Wood Elves as well as High Elves, is a priest that serves Vol, god of smiths, artifice, and crafting. Vol is revered pretty much everywhere amidst all the elves, and each of the three elven peoples, High, Dark, and Wood Elves, have unique godly anvils in their respective zones, at least if you believe Total War. Already, the Smith Priest is pretty cool. Not only do you acquire high magic, but your spells require some pretty insane sacrifices and rely on the power of magical crafting and artifacts. Very valuable to any party, and the sacrifices can rise all the way up to cutting your own eyes out. There are also talents here that let you overcome some of your sacrifices or injuries. Mind over Body lets you pray to temporarily become painless, ignore critical wounds and condition, and eventually ignore your own blindness. Some pretty cool stuff. The spells of a Vol Priest are interesting as well. Many of them focus on the protection of the Forge. This is where I put in a sneaky recommendation for a Vol Priest to set up a mobile workshop via a giant wagon and horse, thus allowing you to use these on the move. Being able to create normally rare magical items in a really fast manner, being able to detect invisibility or crafting materials, curing an item of its imperfections and flaws, and turning your forge into a magical castle are some of the really thematic options you can do here. The Stormweaver is an elven priest of Mathlon. Mathlon is the god of storms and oceans, and essentially is an ancestor for humans worshipping Manon and Stromfels for the oceans and storms respectively. So you'll see these guys aboard ocean ships, docks, or other such places where they might bless or protect ships going on oceanic voyages. Beyond like the other priestly careers, learning high magic, the Stormweaver gets a good amount of sailing skills and some really cool unique talents, specifically Eye of the Storm, which lets you ignore negative environmental effects, fatigue conditions, and the weather. Obviously, the spells here are a combination of life magic and heaven's magic alongside various niches a Mennonite sea priest might fill. The ability to sense the weather, change the waves, befriend sea creatures Aquaman style, and summon sea creatures Aquaman style, including a thing that looks like that massive fish from Phantom Menace. Really cool stuff. The Lore Master of Hoeth are the premier Hoeth priests and magic casters. Many Lore Masters have started out as both mages and or sword masters of Hoeth. The combination of sword dancing, asceticism, and magic serves as ample methodology for Hoeth worship. The unique talent you get with this is so-called Sanctuary of the Mind, which allows the player to avoid corruption derived from spells, boosting their research, and becoming exempt from Yenlui negatives. This is a combination of a mage and scholar type career, using your previous career experience for combat applications and using your current experience for languages, lores, and academic endeavor pursuits. In closing, magic and religion in Ulthuan is insanely intertwined, and the choices of such paths, while a little limited if going solely off this book, does serve as a solid expansion for High Elf character side grades mid-game or as late-game specialization careers. Ulthuan rarely, if ever, devolves into open war with each other. Indeed, all of the major houses and zones of Ulthuan, covered in my WFRP review with another shameless plug, features a number of specializations that all fit together, allowing Ulthuan to repel any threats that might approach its shores. So instead of open war or visible diplomacy, it might engender the elves to engage in intrigues with each other. Intrigues on Ulthuan are normally within itself, but intrigues may also extend to the Lorelorn Forest, thanks to the High Elves' willingness to reunite with the Wood Elves, and any major city center that has a connection to Ulthuan, such as Altdorf, Marienburg, Brionne, maybe Erengrad, maybe Skeggi, and more. Engaging in an intrigue might require a combination of in-book reading alongside some form of lore knowledge, so GMs better be quick on their feet. The intrigue system takes the form of a relatively simple template, with varying degrees of difficulty and potential subjects to each. First, we have the Whisperer. The book calls this the Intriguer, which I personally think sounds really dumb, so we'll call it the Whisperer. It's the person instigating the intrigue or seeking to advance it, and you don't necessarily have to be in both of these camps. Then we have the Target, which can be anything from an NPC to a house to a sub-faction to a whole faction. The Agenda serves as what we are actually trying to get done, and the Tactic is the methodology to perform the agenda. Actually performing an intrigue is pretty naturally intuitive, but there are some nuances here and there. The intrigue process itself is divided into 5 steps in the book. Number 1. Determine your target and agenda. Perhaps you're trying to get into a minor house to buy a substantial number of goods in order to raise the stock price of an item you have investment in. Perhaps you're trying to get a criminal who killed someone close to you, such as another player, executed instead of exiled, so on and so forth. Your target may or may not have feelings on the agenda, so the GM should determine that, which should help determine skill difficulty and complexity, which, speaking of, number 2, your GM determines complexity, which is determined by minor, moderate, or major. Minor challenges are easy to solve. You just use a pickaxe or pepper spray and... wrong minors. Minor challenges are easy to solve. These are intrigues with clear and achievable goals. Moderate intrigues have at least a solid degree of nuance. It requires the Whisperer to advance carefully. Finally, major intrigues are for those that are highly complex, have multiple different moving parts, and rely on multiple setups. Number 3, decide a tactic. GM's choice if there's multiple potential tactics or if the party is unsure where to go. Tactics can range from simple persuasion to other such methods and checks, theoretically stopped only by your skill list. Number 4, the persuasion test. This is where you actually engage the intrigue and persuade the target to do the thing you want, and dependent on outcome, it can go forward, get worse, or stalemate. Usually, a persuasion test can only be performed every 48 hours of game time. The tests, again, can be anything from charm, to intimidate, to using leverage, or if you're really blunt, putting a sword to the elf's throat, but surely this will have some consequences. Number 5. Finally, the intrigue is developed. There's a handy success level chart for this, so you can use that, or your best intuition, whatever fits the situation. You can also roll complications to an intrigue for extra RNG gamba, which is pretty cool. And that's it for the High Elves Player's Guide, I think. All in all, there's a lot of fun origins to work with, covered in my big review, alongside the Yenlui system, the Elder system, the Magic and Faith system, a couple of cool unique careers, and an intrigue system. Not too bad for an expansion book, and obviously I would run with this if you want to run Ulthuan games or characters from Ulthuan. Otherwise, perhaps maybe you can use the intrigue system in the Elven careers as things NPCs might engage against the party somehow. In any case, a solid book. Now, let's get into the expansion of the expansion. Cothique is the windswept zone in the northeast of Ulthuan, and the feature for the Sea Wardens of Cothique expansion book for the High Elves Player Guide and WFRP as a whole. Indeed, Cothique is an outer kingdom of Ulthuan, and as such, much of its people focus less on scholarly pursuits and instead on oceanic endeavors and defense against dark elves. Much of Cothique is hidden underground to protect against the wind and the various attacks, and Cothique itself is shrouded by a vexing mist, capable of wrecking ships, who lack special Eltarin language maps, and even then, the maps themselves require checks to read and get to the shore proper. There are 8 prominent houses of Cothique, each holding a city with their own unique intrigue modifiers, desires, and skills. From craftsman cities to powerful fortress towns, there are a multitude of places to use here for a high elven adventure that features naval exoticism, ambition amidst lower houses, and some interesting characters to meet. Of course, Tyrion and Teclis were born here, but they're out and about doing other shit, I guess, so they're not here. As for other prominent characters that a party could actually meet, the public characters we have are Cothique's 7 princes, in line with the 8 prominent houses of Cothique. Poor Mistnar lacks a council seat and would surely love one. That can be a source of adventure. We have an imperial merchant from Altdorf, a Norskin spy, some powerful high mages, and a few others. Worship of the gods in Cothique features Mathlon, Kurnus, Anathrema, Vol, Hoeth, Cain, Athardi, and Slaanesh. In short, Cothique is a fantastic place to interact with sea cults, hunter cults, magic cults, which have a serious prominence in Cothique thanks to the harsh environment, piratical cults of Cain, and of course, pleasure cults, dedicated to authority and more dangerously, and perhaps exciting, Slaanesh. These cults exist primarily because of the wealth, but equal levels of danger and both mundane and magical competence required to eke a successful living here. Many farmers here are actually Garon mages, mages of life that boost the crop's resistances, and the wealth from all the trading and exotic hunting means that pleasure cults are quick to spread in the noble houses, with decadence and hedonism sure to follow in equal measure. In this book, you can find the names and attributes of said cults, alongside some fun, flavorful stories about Cothique's way of life, and how magic and the sea are generally incorporated in almost every piece of a Cothiquian's existence. Very, very different than the low fantasy nature of the old world, and this makes it stand out quite well. In terms of direct mechanics, we do have charioteering rules here, which is quite interesting, and honestly, looking them through, they're quite powerful. Maneuver tests are used for driving, and it can only be opposed with a dodge. This means that low agility tanks will be absolutely shredded by chariot riding characters. That SL difference, though, assuming the charioteer is successful, is then added to everyone's attack, depending on who's in the chariot as it passes by. Pretty strong stuff. This city is where the 7 princes of Cothique come to meet and where much of Cothique's various intrigues take place. The city is heralded by one Prince Dalaran, the High Justice of Cothique and the premier in the execution of justice and such things. This city and the resulting palace is a fantastic place to institute intrigues. Each major prince has a number of intrigue modifiers as well, so one method of intrigue might not work on the other. All in all, each prince has some really cool intrigue modifiers. A malevolent spite, a Norskin spy, Shadowblade, a notable character from fantasy battles and Warhammer 2's Vortex campaign cutscenes, and more. Because Sea Wardens is focusing only on a single area, I could dedicate an entire video to it, but for now I feel it serves as an excellent expansion to the High Elf Player's Guide for those of you who want a place in Ulthuan to specifically adventure and use the mechanics explored earlier. Mainly, while the High Elf Player's Guide module focuses on the broad framework, the Sea Wardens focuses on providing more substantial adventure hooks and ways to use the content I previously described. But because Ulthuan itself is a rare location, this doesn't have a lot of use if you never plan on actually going to Cothique, unless you want to poach some interesting NPCs, intrigues, or monsters to use in your games. So that's about it, honestly. I felt the disparity between humans and the other species were a bit too large in my review, so I wanted to close that gap just a little bit, providing a brief analysis and review of the High Elves Player's Guide beyond their origins with what I covered, and Sea Wardens, given its recent release, fits well into the bill. Honestly, my main critique comes down to a form of preference and theme. If you don't like High Elves, nor if you enjoy highly magical endeavors or scenarios, and you prefer the more down-to-earth stuff, the elf stuff might be a pretty hard pass for you. If you think of it as a positive addition to the Warhammer world, a brief ray of exotic light in the darkness, then it can definitely add flavor to your massive sandbox campaigns or Ulthuani campaigns specifically. Thank you so much for watching this little addendum video. I really appreciate your time. If you like this video and want to see more, feel free to check out my Patreon and watch our games played every Sunday afternoon on Twitch, both linked below. I'll see you all for the next one.